I stood at the head of the reception hall, still wearing the black suit I had buried my wife in just 2 hours earlier. The room was filled with people, friends, colleagues, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. They moved around me like ghosts, their voices a low, muffled hum of sympathy and empty condolences. The smell of lilies and cheap catering coffee hung heavy in the air. But I wasn't listening to them. I was staring at the empty chair at the front of the room. The chair where Eleanor should have been sitting, laughing at something ridiculous my brother said, reaching over to squeeze my hand like she always did. She had been gone for exactly 6 days. 6 days since pancreatic cancer finally released her from its grip. 6 days since I held her hand as she took her last breath, her fingers growing cold in mine. 6 days since the love of my 43 years of marriage slipped away into the darkness, leaving me alone in a world that suddenly felt vast and empty and completely without color. I had spent 43 years building a life with that woman. 43 years of shared meals, shared silences, shared dreams. We had started with nothing, a tiny apartment, a used car that broke down every other week, and a belief that if we worked hard enough, we could build something our children would be proud of. And we did. We built Caldwell and Sons Construction from the ground up. What started as me swinging a hammer on weekend jobs while Eleanor kept the books at our kitchen table grew into a multi-million-dollar empire. We built schools, hospitals, and office towers across 3 states. We employed hundreds of people. We created a legacy. Or so I thought. I was pulled from my thoughts by the sharp clicking of heels on the hardwood floor. The sound was wrong. Too deliberate, too confident. This was not the soft, hesitant step of a grieving family member. I turned slowly. My daughter-in-law, Patricia, was walking toward me. She was dressed in a stunning black designer dress that must have cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup immaculate. There was not a single tear in her eyes. There was not a trace of sorrow on her face. She looked less like she was attending a funeral and more like she was about to close a hostile business acquisition. Behind her walked my son, David. He was 45 years old, but at that moment, he looked like a frightened little boy following his mother into a principal's office. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. His eyes were fixed firmly on the floor. He couldn't meet my gaze. Patricia stopped directly in front of me. She smiled. A tight, rehearsed smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "Arthur," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Eleanor was a wonderful woman. She didn't mean a word of it. I could hear the lie in her voice, see the impatience flickering behind her eyes. She wasn't here to mourn. She was here to collect." I didn't respond. I just watched her, waiting. She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. The kind lawyers use. The kind that never contains good news. "Before you get too caught up in the grief," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I think we should handle this now while we're all gathered together. It will be cleaner this way. Easier for everyone." She pressed the envelope into my hands. I looked down at the paperwork. The first page was a legal notice of eviction from the house I had lived in for 30 years. The house where I had raised my children. The house where Eleanor and I had celebrated our 40th anniversary just 3 years ago. But that wasn't the worst part. Tucked behind the eviction notice was a power of attorney document, one that Patricia had apparently already forged my signature on, granting her authority over all construction company assets. And behind that, a resignation letter from me dated 2 days before Eleanor's death. I was being removed from my own company, from my own home, from everything I had worked 43 years to build. And they were doing it at my wife's funeral reception. I did not yell. I did not argue. I did not crumple the papers and throw them in her face. I simply looked up from the documents and met Patricia's gaze. "I see," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level and calm. "You've been busy." Patricia's smile widened. She thought she had won. She thought I was a broken, grieving old man who would just roll over and let her take everything. She was about to learn a very hard lesson. A lone wolf might lose his mate, but he never loses his teeth. And I was about to bite back. Before I tell you how I destroyed the people who tried to bury me alive at my own wife's funeral, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe to Vindication if you have ever had to stand up and teach an ungrateful family member a lesson they will never forget. To understand how we ended up at that reception hall, with my daughter-in-law handing me eviction papers while Eleanor's casket was still being lowered into the ground, you have to go back exactly 1 year. The sweet scent of gardenias still hung in the air of our home. Eleanor had always loved gardenias. She planted them along the entire walkway, and every spring, their white blossoms would fill the yard with a fragrance that made our house feel like a sanctuary. But that was 1 year ago, and the gardenias had long since wilted. Eleanor sat across from me at our kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the window behind her. She looked pale, thinner than she had been just a month before. But her eyes, those beautiful, sharp, intelligent eyes, were still full of life. "Arthur," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I need you to listen to me carefully." I set down my coffee cup. "I'm listening, love. Promise me something. Anything." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. They had been cold for weeks now, and I knew, though I refused to admit it, that the cold was spreading. "Promise me you won't let Patricia destroy everything we built." I opened my mouth to reassure her, but she cut me off. "I know you think I'm being paranoid," she continued, her grip tightening. "But I see the way she looks at you. I see the way she talks to David. She's not just ambitious, Arthur. She's greedy. She's the kind of person who would burn down the whole house just to feel the warmth of the flames." I squeezed her hand back. "Eleanor, you're worrying about nothing." "Patricia might be difficult, but she's family, and David would never allow." Eleanor laughed. A dry, bitter laugh that I had never heard from her before. "David," she said, shaking her head. "David is terrified of her. He has been since the day they met. She doesn't love him, Arthur. She loves what he represents. She loves the money, the status, the power, and she will do anything to keep it." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "I've been keeping a file. A file? On Patricia. On her spending habits. On the shell companies she's been setting up using Caldwell and Sons accounts. On the affair she's been having with the CFO for the past 2 years. I stared at her, stunned. "Eleanor, what are you talking about? An affair? Shell companies? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to believe it myself," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to believe that she was just difficult, that she loved David and the children in her own way. But then I found the documents, and I had to face the truth." She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "This is everything," she said, placing it in my palm. "Copies of the forged documents, bank records, photos. I've kept it all. I don't know exactly what she's planning, but I know she's planning something. And when she makes her move, you need to be ready." "Eleanor, you should have told me. I would have confronted her. I would have." "No," she said firmly. "Confronting her now would just make her more careful. We need to let her show her hand. We need to let her believe she's winning. And then, when she's at her most confident, we strike." I looked down at the flash drive in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I don't have much time left, Arthur. The doctors told me yesterday. The cancer has spread to my liver. They're giving me 6 months. Maybe less." The world stopped. Everything went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and irregular in my ears. I could see Eleanor's face, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But nothing felt real. None of it seemed possible. 6 months? I finally managed to whisper. She nodded, a tear finally escaping and rolling down her cheek. 6 months, she repeated. "And I need to know that when I'm gone, you won't let her take everything away. Promise me, Arthur. Promise me you'll fight for what we built." I pulled her into my arms, holding her as tightly as I dared. "I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise, Eleanor. I won't let her take a single thing." She died 4 months later. I spent the next 8 months grieving, but I also spent them watching. I watched Patricia slowly position herself closer to the center of Caldwell and Sons. I watched her charm the board members, cultivate relationships with key clients, and quietly push David to demand more authority in the company. I did not intervene. I let her believe she was winning. I let her believe that I was too consumed by grief to notice what she was doing. And while she was busy building her little empire of lies, I was busy building my case. The flash drive Eleanor had given me was a gold mine. I plugged it into my secure laptop one night, months after her death, when the house was silent and I couldn't sleep. I expected to find a few suspicious transactions, maybe some evidence of Patricia's affair. What I found was a blueprint for a complete hostile takeover. Over the next several weeks, I began to piece together the full scope of Patricia's plan. She had been embezzling money from Caldwell and Sons for over 3 years. Not huge amounts, nothing that would trigger an automatic audit, but consistent, systematic theft disguised as legitimate business expenses. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. It added up to nearly $2 million. But the embezzlement was just the beginning. Patricia had also been forging my signature on company documents for the past 2 years. She had set up shell companies in Delaware, creating a paper trail that made it look like I was siphoning money out of the company for personal use. She was building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent due to grief. And the affair. The affair was with Martin Reeves, our chief financial officer. They had been together for 3 years, meeting in hotel rooms across the state while David was traveling for business. Martin had been helping Patricia set up the financial infrastructure for her takeover. But the worst, the absolute worst, was what I discovered about David. My son was not a victim. He was an accomplice. I found emails between David and Patricia dating back 5 years. He knew about the embezzlement. He knew about the forged documents. He knew about the affair. And he didn't care. Because Patricia had convinced him that once they took control of Caldwell and Sons, they would be worth hundreds of millions. They could live anywhere they wanted, buy anything they wanted, never work a day in their lives again. David had sold his mother's honor, his father's legacy, and his own integrity for the promise of easy money. I sat in my study, staring at the computer screen, feeling something inside me break. This was not the son I had raised. This was not the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, taught to drive a car, taught to be a good man. Something had warped him. Something had hollowed him out and filled the empty space with greed and cowardice. I thought about Eleanor, about the promise I had made to her on that last morning, about the flash drive she had placed in my hand, trusting me to protect everything we had built. I would not fail her. I called a meeting with Victor Lang, my personal attorney. Victor was 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and entirely without sentiment. He had represented Caldwell and Sons for over 30 years, and he knew every legal loophole, every tactical advantage, every way to bury an opponent in paperwork. I sat across from him in his office and laid out everything I had discovered. Victor listened without interruption, his face an impenetrable mask. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low, appreciative whistle. "Arthur," he said slowly, "you have been sitting on a bomb. This is not just embezzlement. This is wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and possibly a dozen other felonies I haven't even identified yet." "I know," I said. "Patricia is going to make a move soon. She has to. The longer she waits, the more likely someone will discover what she's been doing." "Then we let her," Victor said, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We let her make her move. We let her think she's won. And when she's standing at the top of the mountain, we show her exactly how high she's climbed and how far she's about to fall. Can we do that?" Victor leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with predatory anticipation. "Arthur, for the past 30 years, I've been watching people like Patricia try to steal their way to the top. And for 30 years, I've been watching them fail. Because they always make the same mistake. They think they're the smartest people in the room. They never consider that someone might be smarter. We worked for weeks, methodically assembling the evidence. Victor contacted Special Agent Catherine Morrison from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, a woman he had worked with on several high-profile cases. She was a bulldog, sharp, relentless, and entirely unimpressed by wealth or status. We handed over the digital evidence, the financial records, the photos, the emails. Agent Morrison assigned a small team to the case, and they began tracking Patricia's movements, following the money, building their own parallel investigation. Meanwhile, I played the role of the grieving, broken old man. I shuffled into the office each morning, wearing the same somber expression. I let Patricia take charge of meetings. I signed documents without reading them. Or at least, I let her think I was signing them. What I was actually doing was planting evidence. I would carefully leave certain documents on my desk, knowing Patricia would photograph them and add them to her file of supposed evidence against me. I would have Victor send her subtle signals, false openings, manufactured weaknesses to draw her out, to make her more confident, more reckless. And she took the bait every single time, because Patricia was not just greedy, she was arrogant. She genuinely believed she was the smartest person in the room. She genuinely believed she had outmaneuvered me. She had no idea she was walking directly into a trap. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place 2 weeks before the funeral. I was sitting in my study when Victor called. "She's done it," he said, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. "She's filed the motion to have you declared mentally incompetent. She's claiming grief-induced dementia. She's submitting the forged documents, the fake financial records, everything. Arthur, she's going to make her move at the funeral." "The funeral?" "She's filing the final papers in probate court the day after. She wants to catch you off guard, emotionally fragile. She'll present the eviction notice at the reception, maybe even try to get you to sign something in front of witnesses. She wants to make it official while you're at your weakest." I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. She was going to try to destroy me at my own wife's funeral. "I won't give her the satisfaction," I said. "When is the reception?" 2 hours after the burial." "Good. Have Agent Morrison and her team ready." "And Victor?" "Yes. Make sure there's a camera. I want all of this on record." The day of the funeral arrived. I woke before dawn, as I had every day since Eleanor's death, and sat in the quiet darkness of our bedroom. The room still smelled like her. Her lotion, her perfume, the faint trace of gardenias she had always loved. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. I remembered our wedding day, how she had smiled at me as we walked down the aisle. I remembered the birth of our children, the way she had held them in her arms like they were the most precious things in the world. I remembered the late nights when we would sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing, the years slipping by like water through our fingers. She was gone, and the people who were supposed to be family were circling like vultures. I rose from the bed and dressed carefully. The black suit was perfectly tailored, the white shirt crisp and clean. I spent an extra minute adjusting my tie in the mirror, making sure every detail was perfect. This was not just a funeral. This was a battlefield. The service was beautiful. Eleanor's favorite hymns were played. Friends and family spoke about her kindness, her generosity, her fierce determination. I sat in the front row, listening to the words, feeling the tears fall freely down my cheeks. But I was also watching. I watched Patricia sit in the second row, her face a mask of practiced sympathy. I watched David sit beside her, his eyes on the floor. I watched Martin Reeves stand in the back of the church, trying to look inconspicuous. They thought they were so clever. They thought they had me beaten. I let them believe it. After the burial, we gathered at a local banquet hall. It was a modest venue. Eleanor had never wanted anything extravagant, and it was filled with people who had loved her. The mood was somber but warm. People shared stories, laughed through tears, held each other close. And then Patricia made her move. I saw her approach from across the room, the manila envelope tucked under her arm. David shuffled behind her, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. She stopped directly in front of me. "Arthur," she said, her voice slick and false. "I'm so sorry for your loss." She said it like she meant it, but I could see the impatience in her eyes, the greed, the hunger. She reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope. "Before you get too caught up in the grief," she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "I think we should handle this now while we're all gathered together. It will be cleaner this way, easier for everyone." She pressed the envelope into my hands. I looked down at the paperwork, the eviction notice, the power of attorney, the resignation letter. She had been busy. She had timed it perfectly. She was banking on the grief, the exhaustion, the emotional vulnerability. She was betting that I would be too broken to fight back. She was wrong. I looked up from the documents and met Patricia's gaze. "I see," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level and calm. "You've been busy." She smiled. It was the smile of a woman who believed she had already won. "We've been trying to do this gently, Arthur," she said. "We knew it would be difficult for you. That's why we waited until now. We wanted to minimize the trauma." "Trauma," I repeated, tasting the word. You wanted to minimize my trauma by handing me eviction papers at my wife's funeral. It's not like that, Patricia said quickly, though the smile never left her face. You're simply not in a position to run the company anymore. The board agrees. David agrees. It's the best thing for everyone. I looked past Patricia at David. He was still staring at the floor, but I could see the guilt written on his face. The shame. David, I said, my voice firm. Look at me. Slowly, hesitantly, he raised his eyes. Is this what you want? I asked. Is this how you honor your mother's memory? By letting your wife steal everything she and I built? David started, his voice cracking. Don't listen to him, Patricia snapped. He's not rational. He's grieving. He doesn't know what he's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, I said, my voice rising slightly. I know that you've been embezzling from the company for 3 years. I know about the shell companies in Delaware. I know about the forged signatures. And I know about you and Martin. Patricia's face went pale. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice was higher now, less confident. Really? I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. Then you won't mind explaining these. I pulled out a thick stack of documents, copies of the financial records, the forged signatures, the hotel receipts. I held them up for her to see. All of this is going to the FBI, I said. Tonight. Unless you want to back away from this little coup and walk out of this room. Patricia stared at the documents, her mind racing. I could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes. And then she laughed. Oh, Arthur, she said, shaking her head. You're so naive. You think those little documents will save you? I've already filed the paperwork to have you declared incompetent. I have affidavits from 4 board members. I have David's testimony. By the time the probate court opens on Monday, you won't have a thing left. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. You're a dead man walking, Arthur. You just don't know it yet. I smiled. Patricia blinked. She had been expecting anger, despair, begging. She had not been expecting a smile. Patricia, I said, pulling out my phone. I want you to meet someone. I pressed a button, and the main doors of the banquet hall swung open. Special Agent Catherine Morrison strode in, flanked by 2 other agents in bulletproof vests. They moved with practiced efficiency, their eyes scanning the room, assessing the situation. Patricia Caldwell? Agent Morrison said, her voice cold and official. You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement of over $2 million. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Patricia's face went white. This is a mistake, she stammered. I haven't done anything wrong. David, tell them I haven't done anything wrong. I looked at my son. He was trembling now, tears streaming down his face. He had been living a lie for years, and the walls were finally collapsing around him. I'm sorry, David whispered. I'm so sorry, Dad. Sorry isn't going to bring your mother back, I said. Sorry isn't going to erase the years of lies and betrayal. Sorry isn't going to save you. Agent Morrison stepped forward and placed handcuffs on Patricia's wrists. She didn't resist. She just stared at me with a look of pure, undisguised hatred. This isn't over, Arthur, she hissed. Yes, I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. It is. The trial took 6 months. Patricia fought tooth and nail, hiring the most expensive defense attorneys money could buy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The financial records, the forged documents, the emails, the photos. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Martin Reeves, the CFO, was convicted on similar charges and sentenced to 10 years. My son, David, was given a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and community service. He also had to sign a full confession, publicly admitting his role in the conspiracy. He tried to call me after the trial, several times. I let every call go to voicemail. I couldn't speak to him. I couldn't look at him. Every time I heard his voice, I heard his mother's voice, and I felt the betrayal all over again. The aftermath of the trial was a strange, confusing time. Caldwell and Sons was in shambles. The embezzlement had taken a significant toll, and the company's reputation had been damaged by the scandal. I had to lay off nearly a quarter of the workforce, selling off assets just to keep the company afloat. But I did keep it afloat. I brought back the old employees, the ones who had been loyal to Eleanor and me for decades. I restructured the board, bringing in honest, trustworthy people. I rebuilt, brick by brick, the same way Eleanor and I had built it all those years ago. And I thought about Eleanor every single day. I started a foundation in her name, the Eleanor Caldwell Memorial Scholarship Fund. It provided full tuition and living stipends to underprivileged students who wanted to pursue careers in construction management. The first class of scholarship recipients graduated last spring, and I began a new tradition. Every year on the anniversary of her death, I would visit her grave and place a single gardenia on the headstone. I would sit there for hours, telling her about my life, about the company, about the children she had never met. I talked to her like she was still there, because in a way, she was. I'm 73 years old now. I still go to the office every morning. I still look at the photos on my desk. Eleanor, the children, the grandchild I never got to know. I still think about what she said to me on that last morning, her hand cold in mine, her eyes full of desperate hope. Promise me, Arthur. Promise me you'll fight for what we built. I did, Eleanor. I fought, and I won. I used to ride upon your shoulders thinking you could touch the sky. Every road felt less uncertain when I saw the world through your eyes. You were stronger than the mountains, taller than the northern pines. And when the winter winds were coming, you would stand between them and I. Time kept moving like the river. You slipped slowly off the sea. But no matter where life took me, you were always part of me. I am my father's son. Every step I take and every time I choose to stand when it's easier to break, I carry your courage in my heart, your fire inside my soul. And though the years keep moving on, your love still leads me home. Thank you for listening to this story on Vindication. If you enjoyed it, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. I read every single one, and I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your country in the comments and tell me, have you ever had to cut toxic family out of your life? I'll be reading and responding. And remember, a lone wolf might lose his mate, but he never loses his teeth. See you in the next story.